They paid me an absurd amount of money just to be on call. A private estate, a surgical suite built beneath the mansion, and a list of rules taped to the door. I thought I was being hired for exclusivity, but on my first night, I realized something was terribly wrong. This wasn't medicine. This wasn't healing. This was ritual. The job offer came in a black envelope. No return address. Just my name typed in elegant silver lettering. I almost threw it away, thinking it was some exclusive club invitation or a marketing gimmick. But the card inside wasn't ordinary. It was thick, matte, and carried a short message. We are in need of a discreet surgeon. Compensation generous. Details will follow upon your agreement. Sign below if interested. And beneath it, a blank line. I'd just been fired from the hospital 2 weeks prior for something that wasn't my fault. A cardiac arrest patient had crashed during a routine valve replacement, an equipment malfunction. But the administration needed a scapegoat, and that scapegoat had been me. So yes, I signed it. The next morning, a man in a charcoal gray suit was waiting outside my apartment building. He never gave a name, just handed me a burner phone and said, "You'll be contacted shortly." His tone didn't suggest a job opportunity. It felt more like an order. That night, the phone rang. I was told to pack light and wait at the corner of 3rd and Elwood at 10 p.m. A black SUV picked me up right on time. We drove for what felt like hours, past the city limits, through winding back roads where trees pressed in on both sides, until we reached a wrought iron gate. Beyond it stood the Hawthorne Estate, an enormous Gothic revival mansion with spires that pierced the fog-heavy sky like spears. Inside, everything was sterile, pristine. The staff wore white, not uniforms. Actual, full white garments like ceremonial robes. They never spoke, just led me through the halls until we reached the basement. There, hidden beneath marble and chandeliers, was a surgical suite more advanced than any hospital I'd ever worked in. And on the surgical room door, there was a laminated sheet. It had only 4 rules. 1. Never ask questions about the patient's identity. 2. Do not leave the procedure room until instructed, even if you hear screams. 3. Use only the tools provided. Personal instruments are forbidden. 4. If the family member watches, do not speak unless spoken to. I assumed it was eccentricity. Rich people love their rules. I figured I could stomach a little weirdness for a 6-figure salary. But the unease began the moment I stepped into that operating room. My first patient was already anesthetized when I arrived. There was no chart, just a brief note pinned to the tray that said, "Remove 3rd rib. Stitch cleanly. Do not discard." That was it. The person on the table was young, maybe early 20s, and had no surgical scars. I was told later that they were one of the cousins. No name, no medical history, no vitals. The tools were sharp, well kept, and oddly antique. The scalpel handles were carved ivory. The forceps looked custom forged. But I worked. I followed the instructions to the letter. When I removed the rib, a nurse in white stepped forward with a velvet-lined box. I placed a bone in it. She closed the lid and left silently. The moment I finished suturing, the door opened, and a man in a black waistcoat entered. He was tall, gaunt, and moved with the stiff grace of someone used to being obeyed. His silver hair was combed perfectly back, and his skin was almost translucent. His eyes were a pale gray, almost white. "I trust everything went smoothly, Doctor?" he asked in a voice that felt older than him. "Yes, sir," I said. "Good," he nodded. The Hawthorne family is very particular, but generous when pleased. He handed me a check. It was for $50,000 for a rib removal. I should have walked away right then, but I didn't. The money, the mystery, the prestige, it clouded me. The next procedure was 3 nights later. A woman this time, middle-aged, pale, with old scars across her chest and abdomen. Again, no name, no chart. Remove left kidney. Do not drain blood. Preserve fully. Again, I obeyed. The kidney was placed in a jar with a viscous, dark fluid. The same nurse took it away. No explanation. As the days passed, the procedures became stranger. A tongue removal, without damage to the vocal cords. A heart transplant, but not with a donor heart. They wanted the heart removed, but not replaced. The man didn't survive, yet no one seemed concerned. When I hesitated during that surgery, the silver-haired man stepped in. You were paid to perform, not to hesitate. Continue. The rules never changed, and I never broke them. But I started noticing things. The patients never screamed. Even when awake, they remained eerily calm, sedated only lightly. Their eyes stayed open, locked on the ceiling. Some whispered in languages I couldn't recognize. Others stared at me, weeping silently. And always, the family watched. Different members each time, stern-faced, silent, dressed in old-fashioned finery. They stood in the observation room behind the glass, never blinking, never turning away. One night, after a particularly grisly femur extraction, I asked the nurse who the people were. She flinched. Rule 1, she whispered. Never ask about the patients. I didn't sleep that night. I couldn't. I started dreaming about the patients. Their blank faces, their open wounds, their bones placed into boxes. I saw the velvet-lined containers being buried under roots, fed to fires, sealed in walls. And then, something changed. I was summoned for an emergency procedure. When I arrived, the surgical room was dimmer than usual. Only one overhead light glowed. The rest of the staff was absent. Just the silver-haired man stood there, beside the table. The patient was covered with a thick black sheet. This one is delicate, he said, a very special member of the family. He pulled back the sheet. I stepped back, breath caught in my throat. It was a child, no more than 10 years old, pale, sickly, unconscious, but clearly alive. I felt sick. What am I supposed to do? I asked. He handed me a note. Insert the obsidian shard beneath the sternum. Do not draw blood. The tool tray had one item, a jagged black stone, wrapped in silver thread. This is madness, I said, my voice shaking. His eyes narrowed. Are you refusing? I looked at the child. I looked at the shard. Something in my gut screamed no, but fear wrapped around me like a straitjacket. I didn't refuse. I did as I was told. The moment the shard touched the child's chest, the lights flickered. A low humming filled the room, like distant chanting. The child's eyes flew open, solid black from edge to edge. He looked at me, opened his mouth, and whispered something I couldn't understand, but it echoed in my skull like thunder. I collapsed. When I awoke, I was in one of the guest rooms upstairs. My hands were clean, my clothes folded neatly on the chair. The silver-haired man entered with tea and toast. You did well, he said. Your service is appreciated. I'm done, I said. My voice was weak. This isn't medicine. This is. He raised a hand. It is tradition. In tradition, doctor is the oldest form of preservation. He left the tray and walked out. I found another envelope beneath the plate. Inside was another check, this one for $100,000, but also a note. You are no longer free to leave without permission. The family values your continued obedience. I ran to the door. It was locked. So were the windows. The hallway was empty. The estate, once full of silent staff, now felt like a tomb. I tried the burner phone. No signal. I tried calling from the landline. Just static. That night, I didn't sleep. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to footsteps that never stopped pacing outside my room. Then came the whisper, not from the hallway, but inside the room, right beside me. I remember you. It said in a voice like cracking glass. You opened me. You let it in. I turned. No one was there. But in the mirror above the dresser, I saw a reflection. My own face. But behind me, the child stood, black-eyed, smiling. And the shard was in his hand. You think a job as a private surgeon sounds prestigious. But when your patients never speak, never move, and never return, when the rules you follow are older than science, and when a child you operated on appears in your room with black, endless eyes, you realize this is no job. This is a curse, and you're already infected. The mirror shattered when I hurled the lamp at it, but the reflection burned into my mind long after the glass hit the floor. The child, eyes black as obsidian, mouth twisted into a smile that didn't belong on a child's face, had been standing behind me. Except when I turned, no one was there. My breath hitched in my throat. I stood in that lavish guest room, barefoot, trembling, the cold hardwood floor biting into my skin. I pressed my back against the wall and scanned every corner, every shadow. Empty. No sign of the boy. No sign of the shard. No footsteps now. But that voice. You opened me. You let in. I stayed awake until dawn. When the sun filtered in through the curtains, I finally left the room. The hallway was lit and warm, as if the nightmare had never happened. The air smelled faintly of lavender and old wood. Paintings of stiff-faced ancestors lined the walls. I moved cautiously, expecting someone to confront me, but no one did. In fact, I didn't see another living soul until I made it to the main dining hall, where the silver-haired man, Mr. Hawthorne, I had finally learned, was sipping tea with a newspaper in hand. He looked up with mild surprise. "Doctor, you're awake." I stood there, hands shaking. The child, the one I operated on. He came into my room last night. He folded the newspaper calmly. No, he didn't. I saw him. I snapped. He whispered something, said I let something in. What did I do to him? Mr. Hawthorne simply smiled, patient, almost fatherly. You performed your duty, doctor. You preserved what needed preserving. The boy is resting now. In time, you'll understand. I stepped closer, feeling the heat rising under my skin. I'm not doing another surgery until someone tells me what the hell is going on. What are these procedures for? Why are there no charts, no follow-ups, no medical logic? He rose, his chair barely making a sound. Would you prefer your medical license back? He asked calmly. Perhaps reinstatement at the university hospital? I could have it arranged within a week. I hesitated. He stepped closer, his tone dropping to a whisper. Or perhaps you prefer the truth. But be warned, doctor, truth is rarely sterile. I didn't respond. I couldn't. So I followed him in silence. He led me down a corridor I hadn't been to before, through a locked mahogany door, and into what appeared to be a library, but not of books. The shelves were filled with jars, hundreds of them, each one holding something organic. Preserved tissue, bone fragments, entire organs, some of them still pulsing faintly in liquid that shimmered like oil on water. In the center of the room stood a glass case. Inside was the black shard, the same one I placed inside the child. but now it pulsed faintly like a heartbeat. "This," Mr. Hawthorne said, resting a hand on the case, "is not stone. It is memory, an artifact of something older than civilization. It requires blood to awaken and obedience to contain." I swallowed hard, the words scraping against the walls of my rational mind. "You've performed on the family, doctor, the caretakers of this legacy. Each surgery isn't simply an operation, it's a transaction. Flesh for preservation, bone for appeasement." I stared at the pulsing shard. Appeasement to what? His smile returned. "That, doctor, is rule number 5. One you haven't earned the right to learn yet." I took a step back. "I want to leave." "You cannot. I didn't agree to this." "You did," he said. "When you signed the invitation, you agreed to serve. You signed with blood. You just didn't know it." I turned and fled the room, but the house had changed. The corridors weren't as I remembered. Doors led to unfamiliar places. Windows opened into impossible spaces. Rooms that looked like other parts of the estate, but inverted backward. Wrong. I burst into what should have been the foyer, but found a ballroom, empty and echoing. A grand piano sat in the center, playing itself. Dust swirled in patterns across the floor, spelling words in brief, disintegrating wisps. "You let it in." I spun around. At the far end of the ballroom, the child stood, still silent, but something in his posture wasn't human anymore. He tilted his head to the side, watching me like a cat watches a trapped mouse. Then he opened his mouth. Black mist poured out, swirling toward me like ink dropped in water. I turned and ran. My lungs burned as I tore through the twisting halls, trying door after door, until one opened, and I found myself back in the surgical suite. Everything was pristine again. White, clinical. The same staff in ceremonial robes stood waiting. Mr. Hawthorne was there, clipboard in hand. "Ready for your next procedure, doctor?" he asked. I shook my head violently. "No, no more." He stepped aside, and I saw the patient. It was me, lying on the table, unconscious, chest exposed, a long incision already marked across my sternum in black ink. I stumbled back, mouth dry. "What is this?" Mr. Hawthorne's eyes glittered. "An offering. You've served well, but the shard is not without appetite." He handed me the same black shard, now glowing from within. "Perform the cut. Place the memory. Complete the cycle." I dropped it. It clattered against the floor, and I collapsed beside it, my hands trembling uncontrollably. Then the lights went out. Total darkness. A whisper bloomed from every direction, like 1,000 mouths speaking at once. Words I didn't understand but fell inside my skull. Images flooded my mind. People stitched with ash, mouths sewn shut with golden thread, surgeons operating on shadows, extracting laughter, dreams, lives. The black-eyed child appeared in the dark, eyes glowing faintly. "You opened me," he whispered again. "Now you must close yourself." I awoke in my bed. Daylight filtered softly through the window. The tray of toast and tea was fresh again, as if nothing had happened. But when I looked in the mirror above the dresser, the reflection didn't match my face. My eyes were darker, just slightly, a tint, and beneath my shirt, a small surgical scar stretched across my sternum. I don't remember performing it, but someone did. I thought I was saving lives. But the moment I saw my own body on that operating table, I knew I wasn't a doctor anymore. I was property. And now, with every surgery I perform, I lose pieces of myself. Memories I didn't give up. Scars I don't remember earning. And worst of all, a name that keeps appearing in the crimson ledger. My name. I avoided mirrors after that morning. There was something wrong with the way they looked back at me. Not just my face, but the room behind it. The reflections moved half a second late, like an echo out of sync. Every time I tried to stare into my own eyes, I felt a pull, like something deeper waited just behind them, watching me from the other side. Still, I tried to keep going as if everything was fine. Breakfast arrived on time. The house staff never spoke. Their eyes, like always, were obscured by the silver-mirrored masks. It had become clear by now they weren't just trying to be anonymous. They were protecting me from something. I hadn't seen the black-eyed child since the night of the surgery, but I could feel him in the corners of rooms, behind doors I wasn't meant to open. The scar on my chest itched more each day. It was a dull ache that pulsed to the edge of my thoughts, like something beneath the skin wanted out. On the fourth day, Mr. Hawthorne summoned me to the East Wing. I had never been there. The doors to that part of the house had always been locked. But this time, they opened when I approached, and two of the silent robed figures led me through a hall lined with portraits. All of them were of surgeons. Each figure wore old-fashioned medical attire, some with plague masks, others in military garb stained with blood. Their expressions were solemn, and beneath each portrait was a plaque with a name and a date of death. Some had dates centuries old, others were blank. The last portrait stopped me cold. It was me, same face, same tired eyes, same subtle scar beneath the collar of my shirt. And beneath it, the plaque simply read, Dr. Reed, TBA. I recoiled from the wall, backing away until my shoulder hit something solid. I turned. Mr. Hawthorne stood behind me. This wing is only shown to those who've earned it, he said, voice calm, as if nothing were wrong. What the hell is this? I asked, pointing at the painting. Why am I here? Why is that here? He looked at the portrait, almost fondly. The family remembers its keepers, its surgeons, its sacrifices. I never agreed to be remembered. I snapped. You did, he said. You just didn't know what memory costs. Before I could protest, he gestured to a door at the end of the hallway. This way. I followed him. We entered a narrow stone stairwell that wound down into darkness. There were no lights, only iron sconces with flickering flames that ignited as we passed. The air grew colder, damper, ancient. At the bottom was a vault door made of deep red iron. He pressed a gloved hand to the center, and the door unsealed with a hiss. Inside was a vast underground chamber. It looked like a cathedral, but older. The walls were carved stone, inscribed with thousands of names etched in spirals. Candles floated in midair, burning without smoke or wax. The floor was inlaid with sigils I couldn't decipher, but they pulsed faintly, heartbeat-like. At the center stood an altar, and on that altar, a book bound in human skin. I didn't need to be told what it was. The Crimson Ledger. This is the archive, Hawthorne said. Every transaction, every incision, every exchange made between the family and the echo beyond. My breath caught. Echo beyond. He nodded slowly. The thing that watches. The memory that feeds. The shard you placed inside the child was not merely symbolic. It was a seed. A tether. I stepped closer to the ledger. The skin on its cover twitched to my presence, almost recoiling. It recognizes you, Hawthorne said. Your name is written here many times. He opened the book. The pages moved on their own, fluttering like wings until they landed on a specific entry. I read it. Dr. Jonathan Reed. Offering. Self. Date of incision. 4 days ago. Location, sternum. Transaction, accepted. What does this mean? I whispered. It means you're part of the ritual now, Hawthorne said. The more you cut, the more you offer. Not just flesh, but fragments of your identity, of who you are. The echo consumes you slowly. I staggered back. No, I won't be part of this. I'll go to the police. I'll expose all of you. He didn't move. You already tried, he said simply. On your first week. My heart froze. He pulled a small device from his coat, an old iPhone. He swiped through photos until he found one of me, sitting in a police station, face pale, eyes wide. He pressed play on a video. In it, I was talking rapidly, breathless. They're performing ancient rituals disguised as surgeries. There's a child with black eyes. I saw myself on a table. The officer in the video smiled gently and nodded, then held up a file. Your name is Peter Langston, sir. You've been here before. You're not well. No, I shouted in the video. That's not my name. I'm Dr. Reed. But the video ended with two orderlies appearing in frame and leading me away. I don't remember this, I whispered. You wouldn't, said Hawthorne. You were returned, and the echo took payment for your escape. I stumbled away from the altar. How many times has this happened? I asked, horrified. Hawthorne didn't answer. I fled the vault. That night, I locked my bedroom door and shoved furniture in front of it. But it didn't matter. I awoke to find a crimson ledger open on my lap. A new entry had been added. Dr. Jonathan Reed. Offering. Left memory sequence. Age 11 through 13. Transaction. Accepted. I stared at it in horror and realized I couldn't remember anything from middle school. Not a single friend. Not one birthday. Not one day. The next morning, I performed another surgery. I didn't want to, but when I refused, the child I was operating on began to bleed from the eyes, not the incision. Black ichor poured from his mouth as the robed staff restrained him. Mr. Hawthorne whispered, "If you don't finish the procedure, you will become the offering." So I cut, and the shard, slick and warm, slid easily into place. Afterward, I cried in the sterilized changing room. I stared at the mirror and saw something new. My eyes weren't just dark now. They were reflective. I could see the room behind me in them. That night, I began searching for an exit. Every door I tried led somewhere wrong. One opened to a version of my apartment back in the city, except it was abandoned, dust-coated, and filled with dead plants. Another opened into a subway car filled with mannequins. One door led to a hallway where every version of me walked past, some weeping, others laughing hysterically, and one dragging a blood-stained scalpel across the walls. Eventually, I found a spiral staircase. At the top was a locked attic. I picked the lock with a surgical pin. Inside, the air was thick and warm, smelling of copper and rot. Boxes lined the space, all marked with names, surgeons of the past. Inside were scalpels, preserved gloves, stitched notebooks, and bones, human bones. One small notebook sat atop a crate labeled, "Reed Original." I opened it. They've done this before. I'm the 5th Jonathan Reed. Each version carves a little deeper into the flesh of the family and loses a little more of himself. To end it, you must break Rule 7. There had only been 6 rules listed in the original welcome packet. There was no 7th. But beneath that final note was a single phrase, scrawled hastily, barely legible. Cut the memory. Cut the root. The shard. The black shard was the root. It wasn't just a seed. It was an anchor. The thing tethering this entire nightmare to me. I had to go back to the vault, back to the altar, and destroy it. even if it meant cutting myself open one final time. The seventh rule was never written down, because once you read it, you can't forget it. And once you break it, you can't come back. I was a surgeon for the world's most powerful family. But now, I'm carving into something far older. A memory that doesn't want to be removed. And if I fail to sever it, it'll wear my face forever. The attic was still and warm, suffocating in the thick smell of embalming fluid and ancient dust. I sat there for hours after finding the notebook marked "Read Original," reading and rereading the scrawled notes until the ink began to swim on the page. To end it, you must break Rule 7. My hands trembled as I turned the page, searching for any other clue. But the rest was blank. Just one blood-smudged message on the back cover. Cut the memory. Cut the root. I didn't know what that meant exactly, but I knew where the root was. The shard, the black fragment I'd been embedding into patient after patient. It was more than a surgical tool. It was alive, and it had been feeding on me, harvesting my memories and identity one incision at a time. I could feel its pull under my skin, nestled near my sternum like a parasite. I had to cut it out. But I couldn't do it here, not with this house watching me. So I did the unthinkable. I went back to the operating theater. The staff were waiting in their usual stillness, robes pristine, faces blank behind those silver masks. They didn't question me as I entered. I wore the same scrubs as always, but under my arm was the Read notebook, and in my hand, a scalpel I had taken from the attic. It had a name etched on the handle. J. Read I. The first one. The original. I climbed onto the table, lay back, and stared at the ceiling light. "I'm a patient tonight," I said aloud. Silence. Then, one of the robed figures slowly stepped forward. They held out a silver tray. I set the scalpel on it. The others moved to assist. They didn't speak, but somehow they understood. They weren't just here to help. They wanted this. Maybe they were former surgeons too. Maybe they had already carved themselves open in search of freedom. Or maybe they were waiting to see if I could finally succeed where the others had failed. The cold antiseptic wiped across my chest was oddly comforting, familiar. And then I picked up the scalpel again. My hand hovered above the scar near my sternum, the place where the shard had been inserted. I whispered a prayer I didn't remember learning, and I cut. The pain wasn't physical. It was like slicing through something deeper than flesh, like nerves and memories and time itself were stitched together just beneath my rib cage. As I cut, the lights flickered. I felt a suction inside me, like something resisting the incision. The robed figures held me down now, not out of aggression, but to keep me from thrashing as my spine arched and my breath came in short, animalistic gasps. Then, click, the scalpel struck something hard. A glint of black, like obsidian, pulsed within the open tissue. It moved. The shard was alive. I reached in with trembling fingers. It burned, even through the latex gloves. I screamed, but I didn't let go. My vision blurred as the world around me darkened. The edges of the room began to bleed shadows, and the air grew heavy, saturated with the stench of rot and ozone. And then, I pulled it out. The shard dangled from my hand, glistening with dark ichor and thread-like veins that wriggled like worms. The moment it left my body, the operating lights blew out with a pop, plunging the room into near darkness. Emergency lights hummed faintly from the corners, casting eerie red shadows on the walls. And the shard screamed, not with sound, but with memory. Suddenly, I wasn't in the room anymore. I was falling, No, being dragged through a tunnel of memory. I saw flashes of my life, torn apart and rearranged. I saw my mother's face, but it was melting. I saw my first kiss, but the mouth was filled with teeth. I saw graduation, my first surgery, the day I signed the employment contract with the Hawthorns. Only in the reflection of the pen, my signature changed each time. Jonathan Reed, Peter Langston, Abraham Locke, Benjamin K. Reeve. Different names, different versions of me. You are the seventh. A voice whispered from nowhere. You broke the cycle. I hit the ground hard. I was back in the Crimson Vault. Alone. The ledger lay open, its pages flipping wildly in an unseen wind. The shard lay on the altar now, pulsating like a heartbeat. A shadow detached from the far wall. It wasn't Hawthorne. It was me, but twisted, taller, eyes hollow, face stretched and pallid like something halfway between corpse and memory. It wore my face like a borrowed mask. You should have left it in. The thing whispered, voice dry and ancient. What are you? I croaked. I'm the part you gave away, it said. The version that stayed loyal. The echo that remained behind to tend the house. It stepped forward, and I realized its hands were bloody, holding a scalpel like mine. You cut me out, it said, smiling wide. Now I have nowhere to go but back in. I raised my own scalpel. You're not going back. It lunged. We fought in a blur of steel and shadows. It knew my movements because it was me. Every feint, every parry, it countered before I could think. But I wasn't just a surgeon anymore. I was a man who had seen behind the curtain, who had lost too much to surrender now. I let it get close, close enough to whisper in my ear. You'll forget yourself without me. You'll be nothing. And that's when I drove the scalpel upward, under its chin, through the roof of its mouth, deep into its skull. Its eyes went wide. Then it laughed, a hollow, empty sound, as its body turned to dust. The shard cracked and shattered. The crimson ledger slammed shut. I woke in the garden. It was morning, real morning. Birds chirped. The sky wasn't red or flickering or bleeding. It was blue, soft, warm. The sunlight didn't burn. I was lying in the grass, wearing clean clothes. My chest ached, but the scar was gone. No trace of incision, no trace of the shard. I stood dazed. The mansion loomed behind me, empty, quiet. I walked inside. Every room was bare. The walls stripped, furniture gone, floors dusty with neglect. It was like no one had lived there in decades. Only one thing remained, the portrait in the east wing, my painting, except now, the plaque below it didn't say TBA. It said, severed. I left that place behind. I don't know how much time passed, whether it had been days or years. My phone was missing, and I had no ID. But eventually, I made my way to a small clinic in Oregon, found a job under a new name. No one there knew the name Hawthorne. No one had heard of the elite family. The world had moved on. Or maybe I had. But sometimes, when I close my eyes too long, I still feel that pulse. Like something trying to find its way back in. A tiny whisper under my skin. That's when I remember the notebook. The one from the attic. I burned it, along with everything else. But still, sometimes in the mirror, I see a glint of black deep behind my eyes. And I wonder, what if I only cut out part of it? I escaped the mansion. I burned the book. I cut the parasite from my chest. But some memories don't stay buried. They claw back through the cracks. In mirrors, in dreams, in the scars beneath your skin. I thought I broke the cycle. But the final cut isn't made with a scalpel. It's made with truth. And tonight, I'm going back to where it all began, to end what I started. It took 6 months for the hallucinations to start. At first, they were brief, just flickers in my peripheral vision. A surgical light that wasn't there. The faint squeal of metal wheels on linoleum. A voice whispering, "Scalpel." Then the dreams came back. Dreams of crimson halls, of faceless surgeons standing over me, of the shards still pulsing inside my ribcage. But what truly broke me was the mirror. I had just finished a night shift at the organ clinic. I walked into the staff bathroom to wash my hands. When I looked up, I saw my reflection staring back at me. But it didn't blink when I did. It smiled when I didn't. And then it whispered, "You only cut the surface." That's when I knew. The shard was never just in my chest. It had rooted itself deeper in the folds of my mind, in the architecture of memory itself. The rules weren't meant to keep me safe. They were meant to contain it. And now that I'd broken the cycle, it was free. I had to finish this. I had to go back. The Hawthorne mansion was gone. Literally. Where the estate once stood was now a construction site. Flat earth and steel beams. A new luxury community was being built there. When I asked one of the workers if he'd ever seen an old Gothic house, he just laughed. Place has been empty for decades, man. That didn't make sense. I had lived there, operated there, bled there, unless time didn't work the same inside those walls. I wandered the perimeter until I found a break in the fencing, climbed over, walked toward the center of the site, and then I heard it, the beep of a heart monitor, the scrape of steel trays, a whisper, "Begin incision." I turned and saw the operating theater. Not physically, but superimposed like a film reel projected over the earth. A hallucination, maybe, or a memory made real. I followed it. Down, beneath the soil, there was a hatch buried under what looked like a utility box. When I opened it, a gust of cold air hit me, damp and sterile. I descended the ladder. Below was a long hallway, lit by flickering surgical lights. It was identical to the one beneath the mansion. The same scent of antiseptic and blood. The same steel walls. The same echo. But something was different this time. There were no surgeons. Only a single gurney in the center of the room. And on it, bound by leather straps, was me. Eyes open, mouth stitched shut, breathing barely. I stepped forward, trembling. "You're not real," I whispered. The body on the table twitched. Then, the shadows in the corners of the room moved. A figure stepped forward. Tall, lean, wrapped in black surgical robes. But it wasn't a Hawthorne. It was my reflection, the same one from the mirror. It smiled, scalpel glinting in hand. "You severed the body," it said, "but not the memory." I backed away. "You're just a hallucination, a trauma echo. I cut you out." "No," it said, tilting its head. "You only cut away the parts you could reach. But I've been hiding in the one place you never looked." It raised the scalpel and pointed at its own temple. The mind. The lights overhead exploded in a shower of sparks. Screams echoed from every corner. My screams from surgeries past. The reflection lunged, scalpel raised. I dodged, grabbing a tray of instruments and flinging it at the figure. It staggered, shrieking in a pitch that vibrated the walls. The bound version of me on the gurney began to convulse violently, eyes wide with terror. If the memory version of me died, I knew instinctively I would die too. I had to end this. I lunged at the shadow, wrestled the scalpel from its grip. We tumbled to the floor, rolling in a blur of fists and flashing steel. It bit my shoulder. I headbutted it. Blood, my blood, splattered the walls. Then I pinned it beneath me, and for the first time, it stopped fighting. "I'm you," it whispered. "I'm the part that remembers, the part you try to forget. Without me, you're nothing but scars and silence." I stared down at it, and I understood. It wasn't the shard. It wasn't some external force. It was me. All the guilt I had buried, the screams I had muted, the rules I had followed without question, every patient I had failed, every cut I had made to survive. I was the monster I had feared, but fear didn't mean surrender. I raised the scalpel, and I made the final cut, right through its throat. Silence. The hallucination melted like candle wax. The bound version of me on the gurney vanished, and I was alone, completely, utterly alone. When I climbed back up the ladder, dawn had broken. There was no construction site anymore, only a quiet meadow, untouched, with dew glistening in the grass. No mansion, no vault, no hawthorns, just me, free. I walked to the edge of the hill and sat down. The sun was rising, golden and warm, and for the first time in what felt like centuries, I wasn't afraid. There are no more rules to follow, no more echoes chasing me through sterile corridors. I don't know what the world thinks happened to Dr. Jonathan Reed. Maybe they think I died. Maybe I did. Maybe everything since has been a dream stitched together from broken memories and guilt. But I'm still here. And I remember now. Everything. The patience. The blood. The mask I wore every day. But I also remember why I started. To heal. To help. To do good. So maybe I'll open a small clinic someday. Maybe I'll change my name again. Maybe I'll be nothing more than a man with steady hands and a strange scar across his chest. But if you're reading this, if you find this story and you're tempted to take a job that seems too good to be true, remember this. Some scars aren't from wounds. They're from the things we cut away and leave behind. The end